And that is actually the perfect way to kick off the Q&A. So he's in the Republic of Panama as a little kid. What exactly did you do to get shipped to Bowles? So the Bowles School at the time was a military school. So what did you do?
Yeah, when I got here, it was this is really dating myself, it was the mid-60s to late 60s. Bowles had transitioned from being it was a military school prior to my getting here. So it was a place you sent really bad boys. You're like, oh, you're acting like a jerk. Time for you to go somewhere else. So I was born and raised in Panama. I had a couple rough years. Everyone in junior high. I'm convinced that's when you look the ugliest as well. And I came to Bowles for my freshman year. And I spent 4 years at Bowles. And really, without exaggeration, even at the school that it was in, because it was having a hard time making the transition from military to preparatory school. And there were some teachers that they changed my life, without exaggeration. I'm here today because of a drama teacher and an art teacher. So I owe Bowles a great deal. It's an entirely different school today than it was back then.
So there's a specific drama teacher you were telling me about.
Right.
You want to talk about that drama teacher and kind of what he saw in you and maybe how specifically he inspired you?
He was a Spaniard by birth. His name was Arthur Carnes. He passed away about 5 years ago. I talked to a couple of people at Bowles about it. And you ever met someone who's just like volcanic? They have these personalities that are just like, they're overwhelming. He was not that tall, had these piercing, intense eyes, and when he'd give you direction, you felt about that big. You thought you were like, whoa, I'm really an awesome actor. And then he'd give you a note, you'd be like, I really suck. That was really a good note. And to this day, I know I direct or I use certain techniques, having learned from him. I went on from Bowles, directed a lot of little theater in Panama when I went back to Panama. And I know I directed based on a lot of what I learned from this individual who, man, he was just a force of nature and seemed to have a perception about lines and how to dig into characters and find some subtext to a character that you never would have thought of. Anyway, I was like, what's this guy doing at Bowles? I mean, I meant it in the best way, but I was like, he's really an amazing actor and director. And he was extraordinary.
You, George, you had mentioned to me that Oliver and Company that's playing behind us, you had mentioned that even when you directed your first feature film, that you used techniques that you felt like are the
Yeah, absolutely. Working in animation, I liken it to working sort of in layers. You first direct the voice talent. The dialogue has to be done first before the animator even touches it. We'd go into sessions with, in this case it was Billy Joe and Bette Midler and Cheech Marin and stuff like that. We'd have scripts, I'd read it through them, but I would act out a lot in front of them. But I would always ask the actor or actress, how much information do you want? Like for something like Bette Midler or like someone who's really established, Treat Williams or Robert De Niro, there's certain actors that you cannot feed them lines. They're not interested in the mechanics. They're not interested in slower, faster, bring it down, bring it up, amplify. They're more interested in, I want the world that human being lives in. Let me do the rest. And I found I just had to sort of tailor it. So I would work and ask different actors. And I got a lot of that from Arthur. And I would ask, do you mind if I act this out? I'm not trying to feed you the line, but do you mind if I act it out? And most were very, very gracious about it. And again, I got that from this, it's hard to believe it, I got it from this drama teacher at Bowles in 1966. Who knew?
I didn't know people were still alive back then.
It's incredible, it's incredible. It's the late Cretaceous.
So you're in the Republic of Panama, you're a little kid, you're getting in trouble. Were you
just a little bit.
A little bit of trouble, okay. Back then, were you even drawing kids?
Yeah.
So you did an animated feature film, but kind of which came first? Were you drawing characters and then you got interested in the movies, or did you know? So you
That's
tell
a
me
good question.
how
That's a good
that
question.
unfolded.
No, I always drew. I drew as a kid. I drew all the time. I spent a lot of time drawing on stuff I shouldn't have been drawing on. I always liken it to, there's always that one kid in elementary school who every Christmas draws the holly. You know, I don't know if that means, if that resonates or anything, or does, you know, draws the Hanukkah. I was that kid. All right, George, it's Christmas. You get to draw the holly. Oh yeah, I get to draw the holly. You know, my mind and life was really small. So I always drew, and I just drew and drew and drew. Majored in film from Emerson College in Boston, more as a trade, more thinking like, you know, I'll never make a career out of drawing, but if I learned film, I could edit, cut, do Foley, do sound effects, do stand-in, do grip, just as a trade. But I always kept drawing and drawing and drawing and drawing. Majored in film, went back to Panama to do commercials in Spanish. That's pretty crazy. And read an article, sort of jumping ahead when I'm helping you out here, read an article in some news magazine, film magazine, that they were looking for artists to work at Disney. I was like, work at Disney? There's a real old Woody Allen movie called Bananas. How many of you know it? Anyway, he's daydreaming that he's having dinner with the president, but that's what it felt like. He heard harps, and there was a harpist in his closet in the hotel room. I love the gag. That's what it felt like. Disney, work at Disney. I sent him a portfolio from Panama, and they wrote me back, thanks, but no thanks. Keep your day job. I was like, hey, come on, man, I'm good. Well, I sort of misinterpreted what they were looking for. I moved to Los Angeles anyway, thinking, it's like living in any small town. I was ready to move on. So I moved to Los Angeles and was lucky enough to work at a lot of different studios. Chuck Jones, Hanna-Barbera, a lot of different places. And it worked out for the best because I really learned a lot. I have sort of the attitude that no matter what horrible job you've got, if you have a reasonably open mind, you'll get something out of it. And I did. I got a lot of it. Anyway, long-winded way of answering. I always drew. And I sort of thought, wow, you know what? Animation would be a perfect blend of all the things I do. I play classical guitar, so I understand music. I can draw, I can paint. I've done a lot of theater. I can act, I can direct. I direct better than I act. I'm not very good at that. I direct better. And thought, you know, I'll give this a try. It's just purely like, well, you know what? I'm in my early 20s. I have nothing else to lose, so I'm moving to LA. And I swear, I thought, I'm gonna get fired. I'm gonna land somewhere, and you're just gonna last like a year, and they're gonna go, who hired you? Why are you here? And 30 years later, I'm still working for this company, so I guess I did something right.
And so you ended up directing Oliver and Company, and that was a time, and still now these guys are around at Disney, and you have Roger Allers, Joe Rampt, Glenn Keane, all these guys. How did you end up in the director's role? How did that come about? Did you go out, did you think, all right, I want to direct it, even after it, or did you, or how did that?
This is one of those situations where you're in the right place at the right time. I really think fortune has a lot to do with, I don't know, people's careers. I had a painter, somebody who I took a painting class with, who had this great expression. I hope you understand, but he goes, chance favors the prepared. And I always thought, you know what, it took me about a year to get that, but I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. I was at Disney, and at the time Disney was going through this enormous shift in ownership. Ron Miller had been running the studio. He was pushed out. It wasn't pretty. Roy Disney came in. This would have been Walt Disney's nephew. And he brought in an entirely different management team, determined to do things differently. They were not going to do things the way they'd done it in the past. And it was around the same time that I was there, and I just made it clear, look, I've directed a lot of theater. I would love an opportunity to direct. You know, you just sort of throw stuff out like that, and you don't get fired for saying stuff like that. I made it clear I wanted to direct, and I had some experience working with live actors, and I was comfortable with them. and I was reasonably articulate, and I was reasonably vocal and passionate about what I was doing. And I don't know, I was given the opportunity. They were like, all right, we're going to make a movie based on the Oliver Twist story set in New York. Here's your opportunity. I remember Jeffrey Katzenberg. You all know what his name is, right? He once said to me, he goes, you know what? I was having a meeting with him. We were looking at some story reels or something like that. And I go, God, I can't believe I missed this. I can't believe that was a great note, Jeffrey. And he goes, look, we hired you to make mistakes. They're going to be our mistakes. And I always thought, wow, that's pretty damn cool. So we'll get ready because there's going to be a lot of mistakes. I didn't say that. But I thought, wow, that's a really good way to look at it. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. And I do believe in that expression that chance or luck or fortune favors those who are prepared for it, who sort of work for it. And I had worked pretty hard to get where I was.
Yeah, so you mentioned, so Jeffrey Katzenberg, he's at DreamWorks right now, but before that, he was at Disney, and definitely a very influential person.
Yeah, Jeffrey Katzenberg and Steven Spielberg and Geffen now run DreamWorks. Jeffrey runs the animation division. I'm still in touch with him. He's a very gracious human being. I went to Uruguay to teach an animation class on behalf of CalArts. Maybe you've heard of CalArts. It's an animation school in California. Because I spoke fluent Spanish, I went and I happened to see Kung Fu Panda in Uruguay.
Oh, that's cool.
It's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome. And the Spanish there is a little bit different, so I was like, wow, this sounds weird, but anyway. And I wrote Jeffrey a note, and he wrote me right back. I mean, I thought, wow, you know what? Years and years later, he and I are still in touch. And occasionally I'll send him an email after seeing Kung Fu Panda, and what was the latest one?
Well, it's Kung Fu Panda 2. There's
Kung Fu Panda 2,
Mastermind, Megamind.
Megamind. These were all really good movies. I thought they were very good movies. And anyway, very gracious and a real decent human being. I've been well treated.
Yes,
I'm
nice.
not sure why.
Kung Fu Panda directed by Jennifer Flynn.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was a story person at Pixar.
Yeah, she's one of the most successful female directors in animation. That's another very cool person. All kinds of cool. Probably the hardest thing in the Q&A is there's so many cool tangents to go on.
But of course, not as cool as we did.
But not as cool as
she says cool.
Not as cool as it
I
should.
just want this clear. I mean, there's cool, and then there's just really cool. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. It wasn't opening.
Nice. And so, Oliver and Company. So your story that you directed, they have so there's different ways to develop films, right? You hear about the lunch meetings at Pixar, or people just come with a script, or it's kind of a combination of all those things. So for this specific movie, you mentioned you sat down with Jeffrey Katzenberg, he showed you the storyboards?
It's a little more involved into it. When they came in, Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg, they were not going to run the studio. They asked all the animation story people and directors in what would they call a gong show, pitch ideas. Come to this meeting, we're going to provide lunch, throw out a bunch of ideas. Amongst those were 3 that got made into a movie. Oliver and Company, which was just going to be animals set in New York City, the Oliver Twist story by Charles Dickens. The Little Mermaid, Hans Christian Andersen, that was pitched at the same time and greenlit, and I believe Rescuers Down Under. So all 3 came out of that one meeting. This was 1986, 85. This is a long, long time ago. They were all, and we were like given the green light, start developing them. So myself and another story person sat in a room and started fleshing it out, throwing sketches up. How are we going to structure this story? So it was again.
Very cool. Who was the other story person?
A guy named Pete Young. Someone who I mentored under, he was a story person. He passed away, unfortunately, after about a year. He was only in his 30s, but I really learned a lot from this guy. I've had the fortune of working under some really remarkable men and women who mentored me, and it's the reason I'm here in Jacksonville. I know it sounds incredibly corny, but you give back. There were people who did things for me that I'll never forget, who gave me opportunities and taught me things. Benny Washam, was the first one. He was an animator at Warner Brothers, and he would teach out of his home in the Hollywood Hills for free. And I would take scenes up to him. These were old Warner scenes. He'd hand out, here's a stack of scenes, here's a layout, it's bugs, he's running across a coyote, whatever, a canyon. Bring it back to me and show me what you've got. I've been really, really blessed by some of the mentors who just helped me. You have to give back, and you reach a point in your life when, as they say in Spanish, te toca a ti, it's your turn.
Nice.
Sorry.
Artists.
My question is, what's the best way for a student involved in the film industry to get noticed?
Question.
You know what? You're going to get noticed on the quality of your work. You're going to sell yourself. Now, I find there's a lot of online sites where people do mentoring. Animation Mentor is one of them. I know some of the animators on it. And I tend to find the work just speaks for itself. I don't know how else to put it. If you take a class like that and you start generating animation that has a lot of personality, if that's what you want to do, or you're generating artwork that is really superb and you're aggressively getting it out there, you really have to be very aggressive. There's so much competition. Like for example, Walt Disney Imagineering, the group I'm with now at Disney, they build the theme parks. They have an internship program every year. And it's based on merit. It's based on a lot of people send work. And if your work is strong and there's a lot of passion behind it, you're going to get noticed based on the quality of the work. I know it sounds like an easy way to answer, but I don't have... As a director, I've seen so many portfolios and so many reels, you just know right away. You can look at someone's work and go, there's something here. We need to talk to this person. Did that answer?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
I wish I had a more functional answer for it, but if you dream enough, your dream will come true. I mean, it's not as bullshitty as that. But
Right.
Good work speaks for itself. It's just real obvious.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good question. Caitlin?
So I was wondering, like, after high school, like, you going to Walden was really interesting to me. So I was wondering, after high school, what was the first step that you took to get involved in the film industry and get where you are now?
Great question.
The decision to major in film was probably the first one. I felt like, you know what, I should probably learn this. And it taught me a lot about animation later on. But the animation side, I was 25 when I decided, you know what, I'm not going anywhere with this. I need to do this. And then I just started taking a lot of classes at night. And what Disney was looking for, and we still look for in portfolios, is the ability to draw the human figure. It's probably the most difficult thing to draw, and it's probably the clearest indicator to any director or any producer on the skill level of that artist, because it's the hardest thing to draw. So, you just have to try and get in a good mentoring situation. Try and find a school that has someone who's going to mentor you and work with you. And I guess that would be my suggestion. Does that
Yes.
remotely answer?
Good job, George. Good question.
Like this much. This good a question, not bad.
That's a good answer.
Good.
Awesome. And so they will come down and bring people up to the microphone. If we have anybody in the audience that would like to come and ask George a question.
Favorite rock group? I don't know.
And as we have someone coming down, I'll ask one of these that I have on the card as they're give them a second to get set up. What led you to pick Disney? It's from Lizzie.
The quality of the work. They were doing, unlike a lot of other studios, stories based on personalities. Because I love theater, I identified with these characters. They were really well thought out. Unlike, and again, I'm not saying, the schools of different animations don't have a merit to them. I just wasn't interested in them. I wasn't, I'm still to this day, I admire the work that Nick does, Nickelodeon, and Spunko and stuff like that, but I'm more interested in the human condition and human emotion, and that's the kind of work Disney did. And that's what I was attracted to. Plus, there's no question about it, the ego side of, yeah, I work for Disney. Oh, yeah. And you don't. Please don't quote me on that. That's a horribly cynical. No, there's the ego side of it, no question about it. I mean, to be able to say that, wow, you know what? I was good enough to be hired by Disney, it's a pretty cool feeling. But yes, what attracted me was the level of work. So, it's great.
Good evening, George. My name is James. My question is a two-part question. How do you feel the marriage between Pixar and Disney is for the future of the company of Disney? And how do you feel the digital realm is measuring up to the quality of the work of drawing around?
Those are good questions. They're really good questions. We bought Pixar, and Pixar runs us. I don't know how else to put this. John Lasseter, who runs Pixar, this is the first part of your question, who runs Pixar, is at Walt Disney Imagineering and Walt Disney Featuring Animation, our creative head. He makes the final decision. So it has all been, it's all been for the best. Because John, and I knew him years ago, not very well, but I knew him years ago. He had pitched the story and stuff. He has superb story instincts. And what he did for Imagineering was by also now being part of Disney and having it's John Lasseter, when he says this ride needs more work, we make this ride better. And the same thing goes for the films. And there aren't a lot of people who can sit in the room and go, you know, this just needs a lot of work. And not have people go, yeah, well, do you want to come up with a couple $100,000? We'd be happy to do that. I mean, when John Lasseter says this needs a lot of work, we find the money. It gets done. So it's been all for the best because his story sense is superb. He's really, really, really gifted at it. And I'm sorry, the second part of the question, about digital?
The digital, how do you feel that the realm of digital is measuring up to the classical animation?
You know what? I personally think of the computer as just another pencil. They've gotten so good. Did you see Brave?
I've seen all the Pixar films.
I mean, the performances in Brave were of all of them, they were just remarkably good. You forget you're watching a CG picture, and that's the way it should be. Nightmare Before Christmas, stop motion, you forget you're watching stop motion. If a story is good enough, the technique is immaterial. That's my.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good question, by the way. Thank you very much.
That's
Nice
a
meeting you.
great question. It's been brought up by both George and you asked a great question. An Imagineer. Like what the heck's an Imagineer? I mean, true geeks know what an Imagineer is, but
I'm not sure what it is.
I just called George a geek. Wait a minute. Sorry, George. But a cool geek. Does that help? Yeah. But so Imagineering is I'll let you explain it because you're actually an Imagineer. But the magic behind the parks, and then let you explain.
Walt Disney always wanted to make a theme park. This goes back a long, long way. He felt he could make something better than the parks he was going to, where he was taking his own children. And he developed a small group of artists who came out of the early features. Mark Davis, Claude Coates. These were just animators, really very, very strong draftsmen, and he put them in he brought them and gave them the charge to develop a theme park. That group grew into what was called Walt Disney Imagineering. It was actually founded, and I believe, as a separate part of the company. It's like we have multiple divisions. We have consumer products, feature animation, there's the interactive side. It's huge. Sometimes I get asked, oh, you work for Disney, do you know Steve Lopez and consumer products? And I'm like, no, the company's just too big. I'm sorry, I don't know Steve Lopez anyway. It's an enormous company. Imagineering was set up to build and design the Disney theme parks. The first one was the one in Anaheim. The second one was in Florida. The third one, I believe, was in Paris, and so on and so forth. We're now building a theme park, and I'm working on it from here now on a laptop. I mean, I'm doing a lot of concept work in Shanghai. It's going to be an enormous park. Anyway, so Walt Disney Imagineering is a group of artists, and what I love about this division is you're in a meeting with an architect and someone from hydraulics, because there's oil running through these AA figures, and you're working with budget people, and then you've got someone in landscape. It's really an interesting group of people. Anyway, that's what this group does. They design and they build parks all over the world.
Coolest project you've worked on or got to see the behind the scenes for?
I'd have to kill you if I
You kill me later. Tell me now.
Probably the coolest thing was I spent 2.5 years directing Mickey's Film Her Magic, which is in Orlando. I don't know if any of you have seen it. It's a 10-minute 3D movie starring Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse. The basic plot to it is Mickey's going to conduct his orchestra. He's late. Donald Duck is prepping the stage for him, sees the sorcerer's hat, you know, from Fantasia, you know, the blue hat, puts it on his head, and all hell breaks loose. And then we go into the movies with Donald Duck and Beauty and the Beast, Donald Duck and Aladdin. I mean, it was great fun to work on. But because that was 3D, meaning you're wearing 3D glasses, the theater, it's the largest single screen, I believe even to this day. It's like 120 contiguous feet across. It's enormous. We built a mock-up of that theater in a hangar, an aviation hangar in Van Nuys, California, with 4 70mm projectors. It didn't have air conditioning, and it didn't look anywhere near what it looks like in Orlando. It was really hot, but we built an entire mock-up and spent 2 years testing footage. So Feature Animation animated it, we would get footage, we would put it in the 2 center 70mm projectors, we'd all put glasses on, and there were rows of folding chairs at different spots in the hangar. So you have to imagine, this is just an enormous hangar with nothing in it except projectors and a screen. We spent a lot of money getting this mock-up to make sure that all the stereo, meaning all the 3D effects, would work. That was probably the coolest project I've worked on. That and some of the cruise line work, but that was pretty awesome. I'd say it was pretty cool.
Very cool. And it's a good reminder too, kind of career-wise, that he's directed a Disney feature film. He worked in television animation, been an Imagineer. That seems like maybe solid career advice for these guys. Like have a broader view of what your potential career is in this industry.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think you bring the same skill set if you care about what it is that you're doing. I mean, I'm not working on features now. I have no problem with that. I'm directing a lot of small, what I consider little jewels. And by the way, Mickey's Film Her Magic, that will play for the next 20 years. More people will see that movie. My name isn't on it, but I know. More people will see this effort. I have to tell you, it's a huge rush. Really, this is like an ego trip. It's kind of embarrassing, but when I go to Florida, I always go see it. And I go in the backstage. I have a pass, and I come in through the back, and there's doors that lead me into the back, so I can get right in. And I'll watch it with an audience. And it's a rush. I mean, I know it sounds corny, but I remember walking out with some kid, and he goes, "Dad, that was awesome." And I felt like grabbing him, like, "Hey, man, you tell that kid he's awesome, man." I don't know how else to describe it. It's the coolest feeling. Versus, you do a feature, that movie plays, you have no contact with the audience, but when you work on and direct something for Imagineering, you're right there with the guests. I directed something for the Mexican Pavilion. We used the 3 Caballeros. Are you familiar with that? The Jose Panchito Tunnel. We redid that attraction. And when I go, it's shameless, I have to admit, I'll ride, it's a boat ride through Mexico. Different screens. I don't know how many of you have seen it. If you haven't seen it, it's really worth seeing. Thank you. And again, it's just like, those Hitchcock scenes where he always shows up in his movie, like Egomaniac. I have to admit, it's kind of an egomaniac thing to do that. it's a rush. And it's also really educational because you're sitting there on the boat ride going, you know what, next time, that seems, we need to quicker loops, could have been better action. You're learning from comments around you. I've never heard you suck, but I'll tell you a really quick story. I paint, speaking of the words you said, I paint outside. I have a painting setup, and this just goes to show you, you've got to have like thick skin. And I was painting in California with some class, and I'm painting like some kind of statue and stuff, and two teenage kids come behind me, and they're looking at what I'm painting, and they look at the thing, they look at what I'm painting, and they go, hey man, you suck.
Nice.
Wow, thanks man. So you have to have a thick skin to be in the arts. That's the message of that joke.
Yeah. So George, in addition, right, also being a painter is part of his career. You can go to scribnerart.com and see all of his wide range of artwork. He's covering Panama Canal right now, but in that same time that you're there, he's doing a lot of, he has a lot of great paintings that just capture the unique culture of the Republic of Panama, the day-to-day life, which is very cool as well.
I paint scenes of Disneyland as well, and if you're curious, you can go to it, scribnerart.com, and what I pitch to them, there's a number of us artists who do regular events for the parks, and we'll paint scenes of the parks. And what I liked was the feeling of capturing like a day in the life of the park, not doing it overly romanticized, like Tinkerbell and Sparkle and stuff. But there seems to have been a pretty good response to it. It's pretty gratifying. So. Anyway, so.
And so when you directed Oliver and Company, were you able to animate that, or is that one of the things where you felt like, okay, I have to put aside being an animator so that I can direct this?
Yeah, I wasn't animating. At that point, you're directing. I started to say you direct the voice talent first, because the animator puts headphones on, listens to that dialogue, and that inspires that animator. I'm sure some of you animators, you get this. That's all you have to go on. And so I would direct the voice talent, say a Billy Joel line, bring that animator in, we could cast that animator, I would act it out again, and sometimes we would actually bring the voice talent, the animator who's going to do it, that particular character, to the voice session, so they can watch the actor. And they'll sit there and sketch, because they start to get really inspired by certain mannerisms. Billy Joel used his hands a lot. He had this kind of weird cocktail head to deliver these lines. We got that into the character of Dodger. It's just, and even on Lion King, early on, Mufasa, James Earl Jones, early sessions with him, that animator was there. Just sitting on the side, just drawing and drawing and drawing, doing real quick poses, very, very quick poses, just like little mannerisms of that actor that you then got into the performance of the animation. So as a director, you're directing the voice talent and the animator, and then seeing it through the end. So you're not animating at that point.
Was it hard to let go of that? You're like, okay, it's just a different type
No.
of artistic expression. No,
Not at all.
No,
Not
it's
at all.
pretty fun being a director.
No, it was really fun being a director.
Yeah, okay.
I'm a better director than an animator. At some point, you just have to realize you just are better at some things and let go of other things, because there's just better people than you are. And by the way, I was talking to somebody, I'm sorry, one of the producers, thank you. Hire good people.
Kim
Murray.
Kim Murray.
Yeah, you should be the dumbest person in the room.
Yes.
You should. You should get really good people, get better people. There's scenes of animation that I'm looking at now for Shanghai. We're doing some scenes for one of the castles. I'm sorry, I can't go into more detail, but we're doing it. I'm ill-equipped to really give the correct note. I reach out to one of the 5 best animators in the business of feature animation for notes. What would you do with this? There's something wrong with it, but I can't put my finger on it, and he nails it.
There's a question from the audience, from Max. Did you get the opportunity to meet Glenn Keane? So Glenn Keane's a very famous animator at Disney. Ollie Johnson, that's one of the original 9 men. You may have heard about them, kind of a famous pack of animators. And what was it like working with them? Projects in general.
By the time my generation of animators started working at the studio, the 9 old men, these were men who had worked under Walt, or Kimball, Lounsbury, Frank Thomas, Ollie, they had pretty much retired. One or two of the animators stayed and mentored. He was very helpful to the animators. Sorry, the name escapes me. However, there were such strong animators. Again, one of the appeals to your earlier question of working at Disney was you're surrounded by better people than you. So it's only going to make you better. And I wanted to learn. I prefer working with people who are better than me because I'm just going to get better in the process. By that time, the group of animators who are really superb now were starting out, and I learned a lot from these people. I think, again, I think if you're reasonably open-minded about life and who you're working with, you learn from every situation you're in. I learned from teaching painting classes today, from people who've never painted. There's a woman here sitting in the back, she's never painted, and I'm looking at her paintings going, wow, I never thought of it doing it that way. That's a really cool way of doing it. I think if you're kind of an open human being, these things come naturally to you. You have to force yourself to stay open.
Nice. So you directed, so let's take a question from Kim Murray, who's a local producer. She's been a huge help, and a good friend, but a huge help as well.
And had the great quote about working with other people.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Hi, George. 8 years ago, I remember touring MGM, and there's a building there with all the storyboard work from all the animated movies. And I remember them telling me that the artwork there was the very last movie that they were ever going to make completely with hand-drawn animators. And I remember feeling very sad. It felt like something was being lost. And I was just wondering how that transition went for the actual animators and the artists, if they felt like something was lost as well, making the switch to CGI and computer animation, or if they've just been kept so busy that they didn't even realize there was a transition, how all of that went. Because to me it felt like something, as much as I love CGI and Brave is gorgeous, to me it still felt like there was an element that was just missing. So I was wondering how that went for that artist.
It's a good question. There are two schools of thought. I know animators who are more my age who have decided that they don't want to learn the computer. They didn't get into the business, they didn't get into animation. Their love and passion was drawing. Sitting with a pencil and the tactile feeling of drawing on paper was fundamental to them. And that's the choice they made. Others were willing to switch over to computers or work on large Wacom tablets. It sort of depends on who you ask. But I find younger animators, people who are now coming out of school or in their 30s and stuff, that's not an issue. And personally, I think the performance speaks for itself. Either it's hand-drawn or it's done digitally. There's either a sincerity and a love for the work that's evident in traditional, or it's going to be CG, but it's going to be there. It's going to come through. So, but I know there's a lot of animators my age who do not feel that way. Felt that we lost something fundamental. I respect it. I'm not sure I agree, but I respect it.
And then,
It's a good question.
Oliver and Company was one of the first animated films to have CG elements.
Yeah.
Great
Mouse Detective was a movie before this. It was Sherlock Holmes set in London. It was the first time we had started to use the digital tools. There's a chase at the end of it through the Tower of London. And then Oliver and Company expanded on it. This was coming a long time ago. For those, myself included, I could see the writing on the wall that the tool was going to just get better and better and better, starting with the early Pixar work, Wall-E that John directed at Pixar. We were blown away by it. It didn't take much imagination to extrapolate forward and go, this is an amazing rapidograph. This is an amazing pencil in the hands of someone who cares. Not in the hands of an animator who's just going to sit there and let the computer do all the in-betweens and it's just going to drift around and the time is really going to be uninteresting. But in the hands of someone who has a passion for it, the tool is remarkable. Sorry, did that?
I have a question about, and this is actually just as impressive as directing Oliver and Company. So George, and correct any of these facts, but George directed Oliver and Company, and then you were the next, there's directed Oliver and Company, and then you were given The Lion King. Were you partnered with, well, I'll just let you answer that question.
I was the first director on Lion King. Lion King had been in development for almost 10 years before the movie was even released. It was called King of the Jungle. And I gravitated towards it. I thought this would be what a remarkable movie. We could use music from Africa. Lady Smith's Black Mambazo. Paul Simon had done, working with Lady Smith Black Mambazo in Graceland. He'd done pieces that I thought, wow, this would be awesome. What a great combination. Well, how do I put this? I fought for that pretty intensely. And I was not a fan of the decision to go, I can say this now because it's 1,000 years later, with Elton John. Hard cut to the movie coming out and making $1 trillion, and you know, who knew? But I really felt here was an opportunity to combine the settings of Africa, the characters set in Africa, with some really terrific African musicians. So we're coming out of South Africa, and Ethiopia, and Kenya, and Nairobi. I thought, wow, this would be great. The studio felt otherwise, and I left that movie, and it's a business. You know, I was replaced by another director. That's, you play, you know, it's their ball, and that's just life. And you move on, and I moved on to other things. It was a remarkable experience. 6 of us went to Africa. The character of Zazu, the bird, do you all know who this character is? That came out of, we were having lunch, and this weird-looking bird, I mean, really, with this enormous beak, like, what the hell is this thing? Like, and Roger, the other director, was like, man, let's make that Zazu. At the other time, we had a completely different design, it had a real long beak, and it was more of a fussy, prissy little thing with, like, you know, little tiny wings and stuff. And we were like, maybe we were just drinking way too much, but we were like, yes, that's the new Zazu. So it was a worthwhile trip. The other thing that came out of that trip was to, I don't know how much of you know, there's something called aspect ratio to movies, which is the relative relationship of the height to the width, which is the aspect ratio. Most movies are 1:8:5, used to be. Now most movies are wider than they are thinner, so it's 2:25:1 or whatever, CinemaScope, or however you want to call it. We decided to make Lion King scope because of the vistas. You're standing out on these African prairies, and the land seems to go on forever. And we just felt, this just didn't capture it. So, the bird and a lot of liquor got us to Zazu, and then the landscapes got us to CinemaScope. So, it was really a worthwhile trip. It was an amazing trip.
You should print that on the DVD labels on the back. That's where it came from.
Please leave the liquor part out of it if you don't mind. I appreciate it.
You guys cover your ears.
And when I say liquor, liqueur. So it's
Yeah,
it's a
right.
it's a pain.
So we have, I have questions from the audience. I certainly will read those. Do we have anybody else in the audience who would like to come up and personally ask George a question? Yes? Good.
What animation programs do you use?
If I'm working in CG, and I was having this conversation with Bill Pippin, I tend to like Cinema 4D, which is it's an easier way to get into dimensional animation than Maya. Was that your question, like specifically like CG work or Photoshop or After Effects?
More like 2D animation?
I use Photoshop a lot for storyboards, and then I'll take it into After Effects to make animatics out of it, or take it into Final Cut Express. So you can use iMovie or Premiere. That is one thing. It's a really good question. I'm 60 this year. I think if you want to stay active and in the business, and I think this applies to really any work you do, you have to stay on top of the technology. And I've managed to, I'm not sure how, but I've managed to stay on top of it. So mostly Photoshop and Sketchbook Pro, which is a drawing tool that I use on a tablet. I work on a very thin tablet, it's 11 inches by Samsung, and I do all my drawing on this. It's a slate. And if I like to sketch, you can draw right on the surface of it. It's whack-a-mole. Sorry, is this way too much information?
No.
She just has such a simple question, and I feel the depth was way too much. I use probably Sketchbook Pro, and that's by Autodesk, I believe. Yeah, I believe Autodesk bought them as well. Because I tend to work more looser sketches, and then I'll take them into Photoshop. But in Imagineering, and it's a good question, if you don't know Photoshop or After Effects, as a minimum, you're not going to get hired. These are now the pencils of the 21st century. You just have to know. So, anyway, did that answer? Did I help you?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. So if you know Photoshop,
Hey, I have a question for you really quick. So what did you learn this summer at animation camp? Biggest lesson? Or, yeah, biggest lesson, coolest thing?
They taught us how to animate in Photoshop. So.
Oh, yeah, that's perfect. Nice. All right, thanks.
congratulations. That's very cool.
Yeah, both of those, yeah. Both those guys. All right.
Hi, how you doing?
How you doing, sir? We kind of hear the glamorous side to your career. We talk about like all of our companies and whatnot. Do you have any stories about like the not so good side to kind of keep you going? So like, I guess what I'm asking is, those times where I guess you had to keep yourself self-motivated because you were looking for something else, but at the time you were doing something that you really did enjoy. Horror stories, that kind of thing.
Did everyone hear his question? Was there an unglamorous side to working at an Oliver company? Would you like to meet me later for drinks? This is going to take a long time. No, I'm kidding. You know, I'll come at the question a slightly different way. The producer who I worked with, we would hire by humor. When we interviewed people, we would throw out a small suggestion of a joke. And if they laughed and if they came back, we knew they're going to work out okay. Because the movies are so difficult to make, and they take such a long time, and you are constantly changing the story, and you forget why you even decided to make this movie. And you really go, why did I even ask to get on the... I think it's like any long-term job. There must be moments when it's difficult. Probably the lowest point was I was doing a recording session with Bette Midler at 8 o'clock at night. She had agreed to do the voice of Georgette, and she was very gracious about it. She was very professional with me. And I think she expected that we would be done in 1 or 2 sessions. And by the 5th session, she said at an open mic, "When is this movie ever going to get over?" Like, okay, Miss Midler, could we get another line with you? It's a lot of work. It's an enormous amount of work. And sometimes you get notes from executives that you don't necessarily agree with, but you have to find a way to make that note your own. This is hard to describe. You have to be able to take something that you don't particularly, you don't understand, but you figure out a way, all right, I'll take that note, but I'm going to do it this way. It's a really good question. They're very hard to make. These movies are, we spent a year building the first version of Oliver and Company, or even Lion King, and threw it all away. We started from scratch. It's a lot of work. And you can still make me drinks.
Oh, no problem. We can do that.
That's it. You got the gist of it.
Actually, I have another question if you don't mind.
Sure.
What about like the transition between when you made a decision that I want to do animation, and when you actually worked on something as significant as this, was it something that you worked on that you kind of didn't feel so, passionate about, but it was like a perseverance type of a deal that you're like, I'm going to work on this because it's like a stepping stone to something else?
No, I've been pretty lucky to be able to work on things that I felt some passion for. I'm not sure I could survive 2.5 to 3 years on a project that you don't feel anything. I mean, at that point, you really owe it to your employers to say, you know what, this isn't right for me. So.
What is your favorite part of the animation process?
Oh, because I've done theater, probably the voice part, working with the live actors, and when you first get a scene back from an animator, and you're like, wow, I never thought of it that way. You're blown away by a performance. It's really overwhelming. Did that answer it? I wish I had a long-winded, heavy answer for you, but
Hi.
Hi.
I've got two quick questions. Let's see if I can remember them. The first one, I know you're doing a lot of work with Imagineering, of course. And I was wondering, I know Imagineering is a lot of mechanics, a lot of engineering. It's Imagineering. So are there many opportunities for artists to get into that, or is it sort of an obscure aim?
No, there are. They hire, we tend to work, where feature animation looks for artists who are more versed in the human figure and in motion, we're looking more for artists who are more grounded in environmental drawings and love to paint sets, or a lot of theater people, a lot of theater tech people end up at Imagineering. Is it that we're building sets, we're building rides, we're building attractions that are dimensional, that you're moving through dimensional worlds. So, I mean, I have to admit, admittedly, there are less animators than there are feature animation, but it's a different skill set entirely. So if you like that kind of stuff, like my younger brother works with me in Imagineering. He got a theater degree in tech and got hired as a model designer. So anyway, no, there's a lot of opportunities.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm glad George brought that up. His family, you guys are kind of the Incredibles of Imagineering. Isn't it? It's you, your brother, your daughter.
My daughter works in Imagineering. My sister-in-law's in feature animation. It's kinky, frankly. It's like, I have no idea how we all ended up there.
That's awesome. And the second question, I'm assuming you probably know about the documentary that Don Juan did, Waking Sleeping Beauty. Would you say that that's a very accurate representation of how things went on, or is it a little dramatized? I don't know the word. Is it pretty accurate?
That was pretty accurate.
Okay.
It was pretty believable and true too. It was like a golden period of time, and I think it really captured it. They did a nice job.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Did you ask this question? I have a great question on it about, there's some kind of prank letter about the Basil of Baker Street?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you might have known the anonymous, not ominous, I guess ominous, but the anonymous author of the letter sent to, I believe, Peter Schneider about when they changed the title of Basil of Baker Street to The Great Mouse Detective. There was a whole debacle about, well, let's change Cinderella to the girl with the see-through shoes and whatnot. I don't know. You know that.
I didn't even know this.
Oh.
I'm really impressed. Wow. I thought this was like all internal, like nothing.
Sorry, okay, no,
Jacksonville, Florida, at a bar in Jacksonville.
Okay.
Yeah, the animators, we flipped. We were like, it was Basil of Baker Street was the movie. That was the title of the movie. It was set in London. It was, you know, mice pretending to be Sherlock Holmes, and the studio, played by their rules, decided to name it The Great Mouse Detective. We were like, how obvious a name is that? So yes, Ed Gombert, the story guy, did a list of, let's just rename all our movies. And
It
people,
was a jest, right?
it was a joke, but people freaked. It was like, we all took the day off, let's put it that way. Hey, let's go to Starbucks.
Thank you so much.
I'm just impressed you know that. You know, well, that's a good question.
The renamed, it was like the Sleeping Beauty, Girl in the Casket, or something like that.
Yeah, a girl, a castle, and a slipper for Cinderella. The only one that didn't change was the Black Cauldron, because we hated that movie. So the Black Cauldron was the Black Cauldron. That was like,
Nice.
yeah, nice.
Is there any, you were talking about the, where people would send you their demo reels and how you guys, I think, hire by happiness or whatever, where you guys would like tell jokes and see if they caught on to it or whatever. But is there like a trial by fire for anybody who, once they do join the Imagineering or the film animation team and etc.?
Yeah, you're hired for like generally 3 months or 6 months. It's an indeterminate period of time, and It's like a trial period. It's like any job that you take. And you're, at the end of that time, you're evaluated and make a decision to stay on. It did work out. Absolutely. It's a good question.
If you guys want to say your name before you ask the question, that'd be great.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Jamie, and my question is, earlier you were talking about how there's a complete transition from hand drawing animation to the CGI and 3D animation. Do you think that it will ever come back, or is it dead? Because I've never animated 3D before, and I think I probably suck at it, so.
God, you guys know.
You guys ask good hard questions.
Personally, I think it's going to be like, you know what stop motion is? You know what stop motion. That it's going to be a niche in the animation business. That it will be. You just can't build these dimensional worlds that. It's really hard to compare. I think the vocabulary of vision has changed. That, like, people your age, you probably have games, you probably have a setup at home and stuff. You're looking at things that are much more dimensional, and 2D just, I don't know how to put it. Again, this is kind of my bias and my opinion. I think it will only be for certain projects where it lends itself. Like the Japanese director Miyazaki, I don't know if you know, Totoro or Castle, and I don't think those could be done in CG. They don't lend themselves, his graphic style doesn't lend itself, but I think it's going to be smaller and smaller part of the animation business. I could be wrong.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good question.
Good question.
Hey, my name's Rochelle.
Hi.
I grew up mostly doing traditional art, like watercolors and graphite. I never really did any character development or animation. I'm trying to find my place in the art field. Like, I feel like I'm more graphic. I love creating a feeling and colors and shapes, putting shapes together. And the drawing and the subject matter is more of a secondary thing to add in. And I was just wondering, like, is there a place for me? I don't know where I fit in. And I don't know if I am into typography to do more graphic design. I was just wondering if you could help.
I hate to break this to you, you really have to have a grounding in the human figure to work at this studio, because we're a company that I think Disney is Disney because it creates believable characters, from Mickey Mouse to Goofy to Brave to that human beings fall in love with and identify with it, and it's our strength. So I frankly think the work that you're doing is probably better suited for graphic art, like my daughter wanted to work at Starbucks. She loved the graphics coming out of that division. From what you're describing, you should probably think about something like that. And I don't mean that in a bad way. That's a fantastic place that's a great company to work for. And they do their stores and all their merchandise, they do amazing stuff with their graphics. They're way ahead of a lot of graphic work. So I would encourage you to see if they have internship programs, if the company offers it.
Thank you.
That's an honest answer.
His daughter, I know some of the projects she worked on were actually very cool. And it's good to keep an open mind in the art field to do the signs, right, with Disney, to try to communicate across multiple languages to be able to, like, here's where water is. Or
there's a
that's
group
actually
of
very cool.
Walt Disney Imagineering, and all they do is what's called signage, you know, the exit, the carnation, whatever. And my daughter works for that in that group. I got her the interview. It's shameless. I will admit. But she's been there 6 years. Trust me, she would have been fired if she was not good. We don't keep people just because they're related to other people. That just doesn't happen.
So I'm teaching a class down at Flagler in illustration. So I've got all these kids, and I never did animation, although I worked in some story development in film, as a storyboarder. But if I was going to tell these kids that wanted to go into, maybe theme park design, is it important if they know any of these animation programs you're talking, how important is story to someone applying to theme park design? Or you know, because you talked about environmental art, but should there be story stuff involved? They're trying to get it imaginary.
That's a good question. We generally are hiring people because, frankly, they work well with others. We call it like, can you play well in the sandbox? In an interview, we'll get a real quick feel for, we're going to spend 2 years on a project, you need to be able to get along with other people. People who are difficult, or people who are just, you know, you can just get a vibe for they're uncooperative. My response is, most of your students probably should know Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects. I mean, that's really at a minimum. Some of the story things can be taught to them. It's a plus if they have that feel for it, if they have that affinity for the Disney characters, for the whole range of the Disney characters, and it is what we do where we create these great stories and stuff. But I'm not saying it's absolutely necessary. It's a good question. It would really depend on each student.
For your theme, excuse me.
It's okay, yeah, you're good, Brett. That's good.
Because the theme parks seem, I've never seen a theme park built that they make a movie about, but I've seen, it always goes from movie, and then the theme park supports that. So, but theme parks are very story oriented, and the reason that it kind of seems to work that way is because the story is already established in the film.
Correct.
So it makes it a lot easier to, you know, you take a lot of history out of it.
No, that's well put.
So, yeah, I was just wondering about, you know, should some, you know, a lot of the kids tonight took some story development, screenwriting, but, you know, do you think that kids that are majoring in illustration would be maybe good to have, you know, particularly talking about portfolio stuff, if they're applying to, you know, Imagineering, maybe some sequential art to show their story skills, or would it be better if they submitted writing stuff, or, you know?
You know, there's so many disciplines at the studio, at Walt Disney Imagineering, from, I mean, like I was saying earlier, from just concept sketches to, there's people who come in and they're just landscape people, there's hydraulic people and stuff. I mean, I would argue that most people ought to take an improv class, an acting improv class. I think that gives you an affinity for working with other human beings. And it's going to help you with your story, and it's going to help you deal with other people.
Yeah.
So I would recommend that.
Yeah,
That will never hurt, to be able to say, man, I can do this and this and this, and I'm comfortable with Photoshop, but I also have a love for storytelling, because it is what we do.
That's a great suggestion. Yes, stand-up would be very interactive, wouldn't it?
Yeah, improv, it's one of the hardest things to do. You learn a lot from it.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Hey, you're welcome. It's a great question.
So
Good luck.
It's Brett Waller, Big Baby Head Studios. Look up his work. He's awesome. Nice. Do we have anyone else that didn't get to ask George questions? I'm going to look really quick. Mercedes asked what you would tell aspiring animators, but answered that already. Your major was film. In school, did it have a focus? Were you focused on theater?
No, I chose film because, as I said earlier, I thought, you know what, I could use this in a lot of different ways. It really, film to me was like just a lot of trades. It's like, I didn't learn how to be a plumber, but I learned how to do film, so I can always edit. And it's true, when I moved to Los Angeles, I worked as an editor on some very, very bad movies. We were actually cutting a trailer for a movie. I'm not going to tell you the title of this movie, it was so horrible. And down the hall from us, we kept hearing this music. They were cutting Star Wars. And we were like, God, what is that crap from the movie? Like, what a piece of crap that is. You just never know. You just never know. Our movie went into the toilet. Who knew?
Disney has a lot of princess movies. What about more male leads? That's a good question.
That's a good question. Probably there's just more appeal in the princess movies, and there's a lot of pressure from the parks for princess movies. do a lot of business with the princesses in our parks. They're very, very popular. Little girls dress up. Little girls love this, the ability to project and to become Belle or to become Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty. So, I mean, that's not the reason that drives the movies, but they just tend to be more emotional stories.
You're asking a guy who played a poodle wearing a pink hat.
Yeah, it's true.
I've heard in movies directors put a piece of themselves in.
That was me. I'm afraid that's me. Georgette
Nice.
is me. In the nicest, best way, by the way. I'm happily married. Let's put it that way.
Awesome. Any final comments, George? Maybe a quick word of inspiration for your adoring fans?
You know what, if you have a passion for what you do and you really love, it'll just be, it's like the painting I do now. I paint every day. It's just a passion. I don't think of it as a chore. I just really, really love doing it. There's no getting around it. I've been lucky, and the second thing is I've been lucky to be mentored. I was lucky to find people who helped me when I was starting my career. And I'm here because of those people. They've since passed away. I would think of them a lot. And, wow, you know what? They gave their time. So when you reach that point in your lives, I expect all of you to give back as well. It behooves you, and it's the right thing to do. That's my heavy ending. Sorry, I could have ended funny, but I just felt like the right thing to say.
It's perfect ending. Be maximum service to others around you. Good advice. Thanks
good karma.
again, George.
Thanks very much. It was really fun. And I cannot believe she knew that question. I'm blown away by it.
Nice.